Naturally, like used to, you would spend time in the barber shop or at the coffee shop or wherever, and you would have conversations with people.
It was supposed to be just another day in Laurel, Mississippi, but that night nearly changed hometown forever. Ben Napier, the heart and soul of the hit HGTV show, reached a breaking point so intense, insiders say he almost walked away from it all. Cameras didn't capture what really happened, but behind the scenes, tensions boiled over, and for the first time, the future of hometown hung by a thread. What pushed the gentle giant to the edge, and how close did fans come to losing him? Stay with us because the truth will leave you stunned. The golden couple of Laurel. Before the lights, before the cameras, and long before the fame, there was a small town in Mississippi called Laurel. Its streets were quiet, its buildings worn, and many thought it had already seen its best days. Yet in the heart of this southern town lived a couple who would change everything. Ben and Erin Napier were not born into celebrity. They were ordinary people with extraordinary love for each other and for the place they called home. But how did two people from a small town capture the hearts of millions across America? And what made their story so magnetic that it turned into one of the most successful home renovation shows in history? When Hometown first premiered, audiences were instantly drawn to Ben, the towering woodworker with a soft smile, and Erin, the creative force with an eye for design and detail. Together, they became the faces of hope for small towns everywhere. Viewers saw more than renovations. They saw love, they saw teamwork, they saw a couple whose relationship seemed unshakable. Every episode ended with a new house transformed, and every season left fans begging for more. Could it be that the secret to their success was not in the paint colors or the floorboards, but in the authenticity of their bond? Ben, with his 6'6" frame, often stole the spotlight with his charm and warmth. He was the gentle giant who could lift beams and spirits with the same ease. Erin balanced him perfectly, her petite figure and quick wit making her the heart of the storytelling. Together, they painted a picture of marriage that seemed almost too good to be true. But was it? Was the pressure of being the perfect couple in the public eye heavier than anyone imagined? Laurel itself became a character in the story. Every storefront restored, every porch rebuilt, and every community space renewed reflected the larger mission that Ben and Erin carried on their shoulders. They were not just making television, they were preserving a way of life. They were fighting for the soul of a town many had forgotten. But as their fame grew, so did the expectations. How long could two people bear the burden of being both stars and saviors? Interviews poured in from magazines and television networks across the nation. Everywhere they went, Ben and Erin were greeted with admiration. Yet in the quiet moments away from the cameras, was the weight starting to crush them? Could the same love that had built their empire also hold up against the pressure of constant filming, endless deadlines, and the unspoken demand to be perfect? This was the world before the breaking point. This was the golden image of Laurel's favorite couple. But beneath the surface of admiration and applause, cracks were forming. And soon, a night would come when the very foundation of Hometown would be tested in ways no one saw coming. The long day that would not end. The cameras rolled in Laurel early that morning just as they always did. Trucks lined the streets, crew members hurried with equipment, and the smell of fresh lumber filled the air. To the audience at home, the process seemed effortless. A couple sketches a design, a few hammers swing, and by the end of the hour, a family has a new dream home. But what really happens behind the scenes? What toll does it take to make perfection look so easy? It was supposed to be just another day in Laurel, Mississippi, but that night nearly changed Hometown forever. Ben Napier, the heart and soul of the hit HGTV show, reached a breaking point so intense, insiders say he almost walked away from it all. What pushed the gentle giant to the edge? And how close did fans come to losing him? Stay with us because the truth will leave you stunned. Body, the golden couple of Laurel. Before the lights, before the cameras, and long before the fame, there was a small town in Mississippi called Laurel. Its streets were quiet, its buildings worn, and many thought it had already seen its best days. Yet in the heart of this southern town lived a couple who would change everything. Ben and Erin Napier were not born into celebrity. They were ordinary people with extraordinary love for each other and for the place they called home. But how did two people from a small town capture the hearts of millions across America? And what made their story so magnetic that it turned into one of the most successful home renovation shows in history? When Hometown first premiered, audiences were instantly drawn to Ben, the towering woodworker with a soft smile, and Aaron, the creative force with an eye for design and detail. Together, they became the faces of hope for small towns everywhere. Viewers saw more than renovations. They saw love. They saw teamwork. They saw a couple whose relationship seemed unshakable. Every episode ended with a new house transformed, and every season left fans begging for more. Could it be that the secret to their success was not in the paint colors or the floorboards, but in the authenticity of their bond? Ben, with his 6'6" frame, often stole the spotlight with his charm and warmth. He was the gentle giant who could lift beams and spirits with the same ease. Aaron balanced him perfectly, her petite figure and quick wit making her the heart of the storytelling. Together, they painted a picture of marriage that seemed almost too good to be true. But was it? Was the pressure of being the perfect couple in the public eye heavier than anyone imagined? They were not just making television. They were preserving a way of life. They were fighting for the soul of a town many had forgotten. But as their fame grew, so did the expectations. How long could two people bear the burden of being both stars and saviors? The first season of Hometown skyrocketed in popularity. Viewers tuned in by the millions. Social media overflowed with praise. Interviews poured in from magazines and television networks across the nation. Everywhere they went, Ben and Aaron were greeted with admiration. Yet, in the quiet moments, away from the cameras, was the weight starting to crush them? Could the same love that had built their empire also hold up against the pressure of constant filming, endless deadlines, and the unspoken demand to be perfect? This was the world before the breaking point. This was the golden image of Laurel's favorite couple. But beneath the surface of admiration and applause, cracks were forming. And soon, a night would come when the very foundation of Hometown would be tested in ways no one saw coming. The long day that would not end. The cameras rolled in Laurel early that morning, just as they always did. Trucks lined the streets, crew members hurried with equipment, and the smell of fresh lumber filled the air. To the audience at home, the process seemed effortless. A couple sketches a design, a few hammers swing, and by the end of the hour, a family has a new dream home. But what really happens behind the scenes? What toll does it take to make perfection look so easy? On this particular day, everything seemed to conspire against Ben Napier. A delivery of materials arrived late. A plumbing issue threatened to delay the renovation by several hours. Tempers flared as producers pushed for more takes of the same scene, insisting the couple repeat lines that had already lost their freshness. Have you ever tried to smile through exhaustion, knowing millions of people will later watch your every move? Imagine doing that for 12 hours straight, under bright lights, and with dozens of people waiting for you to get it right. Ben's patience, once as steady as the beams he built, began to crack. He is known as the calm one, the gentle giant, but on this day his frustration was visible. Crew members whispered to each other when they saw him pace across the room, his jaw clenched, his shoulders tense. Between takes, she would glance at her husband, sensing the storm building inside. She offered him quick smiles and encouraging words, but even she could feel the weight pressing down. Could love alone carry them through the endless hours, the demands of production, and the responsibility of representing their town? Or was the pressure becoming too much for even this golden couple? The day dragged on into the evening. The crew was tired. The homeowners were anxious. Deadlines loomed like shadows. And still, the cameras rolled. Every shot had to be perfect. Every line had to capture the warmth and charm that audiences expected. But what happens when reality no longer matches the script? What happens when the star of the show, the very man who carries the vision, begins to question why he is there at all? Ben's frustration reached a point that could no longer be ignored. He snapped at a request from a producer. His voice, usually steady and kind, carried an edge that stunned everyone in the room. This was not just another long day of filming. Something had shifted. The cracks in the foundation had widened, and as Ben walked away from the set, his expression said more than words ever could. Could this be the beginning of the end for the man who built the heart of Hometown? Cracks in the foundation. When the cameras stopped rolling that night, the crew expected the usual sigh of relief. A long day had ended, and surely tomorrow would bring a fresh start. But this night was different. Something heavy lingered in the air. Ben Napier, the man known for his easy laugh and towering presence, was not himself. He barely spoke as he packed up his tools. His shoulders slumped, his eyes clouded, and for the first time, the giant of Laurel looked small. What could drive a man like Ben, admired for his patience and strength, to the edge of silence? Whispers began to ripple across the set. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen exhaustion before, but never this. Was it only fatigue, or was it a breaking point? Some quietly wondered if the relentless grind of television had finally chipped away at the very core of the couple America adored. Could this be the moment when the foundation of hometown itself began to crack? Behind the closed doors of their home, the tension spilled into the open. Erin, always the steady voice beside him, tried to reach her husband. But Ben, overwhelmed by the day's chaos, snapped in a way that startled her. His words were sharp, his tone uncharacteristically heavy. For years they had carried the weight of restoring not only houses, but also the spirit of an entire town. Yet in that moment, even love seemed powerless against the crushing weight of expectation. How many times can someone smile for the camera when inside they are crumbling? The truth was that the pressure had been building for weeks. Each renovation came with tighter deadlines, each shoot with higher stakes. Every detail had to satisfy the homeowners, the producers, and the millions of viewers who tuned in. Was it really about rebuilding homes anymore? Ben, who once found joy in the rhythm of woodworking and the smell of fresh cedar, now felt trapped by the machinery of production. Was he building dreams for others while quietly losing his own? The cracks were not just in the houses they restored. They were forming within Ben himself. He questioned whether he could continue giving everything to a show that seemed to take more than it gave back. Was he still the man who once believed this work was his calling, or had he become a character in someone else's script? These questions haunted him as the night wore on, and yet Erin's presence was still there, like a soft light in the storm. She reminded him of the people whose lives they had touched, the families who found hope because of their work. But even as she spoke, Ben's silence echoed louder. Could her words mend what was already broken, or was this the beginning of a fracture too deep to repair? That night, the couple who once appeared unshakable stood at a crossroads. Viewers would never see it, but in the privacy of their home, the cracks in the foundation were growing wider. To outsiders, this was the part of the day when they could finally relax. But what happened behind those closed doors was anything but restful. For the first time since hometown began, Ben walked into their home carrying not only his tools, but also the weight of his breaking spirit. The cameras were gone, the producers were gone, and now there was no script to follow. What happens when the man who builds foundations feels his own slipping away? Inside the house, silence filled the air. Erin tried to start a conversation, but Ben was not ready to listen. He dropped his work bag on the floor with a thud that echoed through the room. His eyes, usually warm and steady, looked distant. Could this really be the same man who smiled so easily in front of millions of viewers? How could the gentle giant of Laurel look so hardened in his own living room? Then came the words that Erin never expected to hear. Ben admitted that he could not keep doing this. He spoke about the exhaustion that had been building, the endless demands, and the feeling that he was losing himself to the show. For years he had poured his strength into restoring homes, but now he felt like he had no strength left for his own. Was this the moment when the dream turned into a nightmare? The conversation quickly grew tense. Erin pushed back with the determination that had carried them through so many challenges. She reminded him of the families who had trusted them, the town that depended on them, and the mission that had become bigger than both of them. But what happens when the mission feels more like a burden than a calling? Could love alone hold together what fame was pulling apart? Ben's frustration boiled over. He raised his voice in a way that startled even him. The man who had always been calm and steady slammed his hand on the table, shaking the room as much as his words. Erin, holding back tears, asked him a question that cut deeper than any argument. If you walk away now, what does that mean for us? For a long moment, the house was silent. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of their own breathing filled the room. This was not the couple America thought they knew. This was not the smiling duo from the television screen. This was raw, real, Or was this the beginning of the end for not only the show but also the partnership that built it? Behind closed doors, the truth was undeniable. The man who seemed unshakable was closer than ever to walking away. And if he did, hometown would never be the same again. A family man torn. As the night dragged on and the weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air, Ben found himself caught between two worlds. On one side was the world that millions of viewers adored, the smiling host, the master craftsman, the man who seemed to carry laurel on his shoulders with effortless grace. On the other side was the private man, the father, the husband, the friend who longed for peace away from the spotlight. How long can one man live in both worlds without breaking? In the quiet of their bedroom, after Aaron had finally fallen asleep, Ben sat alone in the dark. He thought about his daughters, tiny reminders of the life he wanted to protect. Was he giving them his best, or was the constant filming robbing him of time he could never get back? Could the demands of a television show ever be worth missing the moments that truly matter, like bedtime stories, first steps, and family dinners? For years, Ben had been praised for his strength. He could lift beams, carry lumber, and take on backbreaking work that left others exhausted. But what no one saw was the invisible weight pressing on his chest, the kind of weight that no muscle could push away. Was his health paying the price for the empire he helped build? Friends close to him noticed his exhaustion. Some even whispered concerns about his heart, his stamina, and his long days that seemed to stretch into endless nights. Could this giant of a man keep giving when his own body was quietly asking him to stop? He thought back to when the journey began. It was not about fame or recognition. It was about saving a town they loved, about showing America that small places still had big dreams. But somewhere along the way, the cameras grew larger, the expectations higher, and the mission heavier. Was he still fighting for laurel, or was he trapped in a machine that demanded more and more while giving less and less in return? Aaron often reminded him that they were in this together, and she meant it. But even the strongest marriage cannot escape the strain of long hours, public scrutiny, and private exhaustion. How many more sleepless nights could they survive? Could the same love that once fueled them now be strong enough to keep them from falling apart? Ben's thoughts spiraled as he asked himself the hardest question of all. What if walking away was the only way to save himself and his family? Could he really step back from the show that defined him, the show that turned him into an icon? Could this inner battle be the beginning of a choice that would shock everyone? The breaking point. By the time the sun dipped behind the pine trees of Laurel the following evening, Ben Napier had reached his limit. The gentle giant who once carried every burden with a smile was now a man cornered by exhaustion, pressure, and doubt. The day had been another marathon of retakes, construction setbacks, and endless expectations. But this time, something inside him gave way. How much can a person give before there is nothing left? Insiders recall that the crew sensed something different about him. His usually steady pace was replaced with hurried movements. His laughter, the kind that once filled the room, was absent. Was this simply fatigue, or was it the final unraveling of a man who had given too much? Crew members exchanged worried glances, whispering that Ben looked like he was on the verge of walking off set. Could the star of the show really quit right there, in the middle of filming? As the cameras wrapped for the day, Ben's silence was deafening. He walked away from the site without the usual conversations or goodbyes. Instead, he found a quiet corner away from the noise and pulled out his phone. What happened next, according to those closest to him, marked the lowest point of his journey on hometown. Ben called a trusted friend, someone outside the whirlwind of television, and confessed the words he had held back for too long. He said he was done. He said he could not keep going. And at that moment, he was ready to quit. Think about the gravity of those words. A man who had become the face of small-town revival, the man millions tuned in to watch each week, was prepared to walk away from it all. What would that mean for Aaron, for their family, for the countless fans who saw him as more than a television personality, but as a symbol of hope? Could the town of Laurel itself survive if its most visible champions disappeared? Ben's friend listened quietly, knowing that this was more than a passing frustration. It was the cry of a man breaking under the weight of expectation. Should he encourage Ben to fight through it, or should he tell him to let go for the sake of his health and family? Back at home, Aaron sensed the shift the moment he walked through the door. His steps were heavy, his shoulders slumped, his face carried the look of a man who had already made a decision. When she asked what was wrong, he avoided her eyes. Could he admit that he had nearly chosen to walk away from everything they had built together? That night, the breaking point had been reached. Ben stood at the edge of a choice that could alter not just his life, but the future of hometown itself. The question was no longer whether he could endure the pressure. The question was whether he even wanted to. And if he did not, how close was America to losing the man who had become the heart of their favorite show? Aaron's stand. While Ben wrestled with his doubts, Aaron could feel the walls closing in. But would she stand by silently, or would she rise and fight for the dream that had carried them this far? Aaron waited until the children were asleep before she sat down across from her husband. The house was quiet, but the silence between them was deafening. She looked at Ben, this man she had loved since their college days, and saw not the strong woodworker the world adored, but a weary soul on the brink of surrender. Could she reach him before the weight of it all pulled him under? She began softly, reminding him of the first house they had restored together, long before cameras or contract. She spoke about the joy on the faces of families who walked into their new homes for the first time. She painted pictures of Laurel's rebirth, of downtown streets filled with life again, of neighbors who had found hope because of their work. Was it really possible that all of that could be thrown away in a single decision? Ben listened, his hands folded, his gaze fixed on the table. He heard her words, but the battle inside him raged on. He loved Aaron. He loved Laurel, but he also loved his family and his health. Was it fair to give so much of himself to a show that seemed to demand more every year? Could he be both the hero of a town and the father his daughters deserved? Aaron did not back down. She reminded him of their vows, of their partnership, and of the mission that had always been bigger than themselves. She asked him the questions no one else dared to. Would quitting truly give him peace, or would it leave a void that nothing else could fill? Could he live knowing that he walked away from the very thing they had prayed for and worked toward with every ounce of their strength? As the night stretched on, Aaron's voice became the steady anchor in the storm. She reminded him of who he was, not just to the show, but to their family, their town, and to her. Would it be enough to turn the tide, or had the breaking point already passed? By the end of that conversation, one thing was clear. Aaron was not about to let him walk away without a fight. She would stand her ground, and in doing so, she might just save not only her husband, but the heart of hometown itself. The dawn, after darkness. The night had been long, filled with tense words, heavy silences, and questions that neither Ben nor Aaron could easily answer. But when the first rays of dawn crept through the windows of their Laurel home, something shifted. It was as if the light itself was a reminder that even the darkest nights eventually give way to morning. Yet would the light be enough to repair the cracks that had nearly torn them apart? Ben sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. He had barely slept. His mind replayed every word from the night before. The anger, the doubt. Or would staying mean sacrificing too much of himself and his family's peace? Aaron joined him, her expression softer than it had been only hours earlier. She did not speak right away. Instead, she simply placed her hand over his. That simple gesture carried more weight than any speech. It said without words that no matter what happened, she was still beside him. Could love alone steady a man when fame and responsibility threatened to crush him? They talked quietly as the morning unfolded. This time, the conversation was not about quitting or staying. It was about balance. Aaron reminded him that they had the power to change how they approached the work. Did they have to say yes to every demand? Did every deadline need to be met at the cost of his health? Could they set boundaries that allowed them to keep building homes without tearing down their own? Ben listened, his heart heavy but open. For the first time, he began to see a way forward that did not end with him walking away. He realized that quitting in the heat of frustration would not only break the hearts of fans, but also leave him with regrets he might never escape. But was staying without change any better? Could he continue without collapsing under the same cycle of endless work and invisible pressure? By the time the sun was high, a decision had formed. Ben would not quit, but he would no longer give himself over to the grind without limits. He promised Aaron and himself that from this day forward they would do things differently. More time for family, more rest, more intention. Could those changes be enough to keep the dream alive while protecting the man behind it? That morning felt like a rebirth. The show would go on, but not at the cost of everything that truly mattered. For Aaron, it was a relief. For Ben, it was a second chance. And for the town of Laurel, it was hope that their champion would continue to fight for them, not as a broken man, but as one renewed. The dawn after darkness had arrived, yet even in the light, one question lingered. How close had America come to losing the heart of hometown forever? And if it happened once, could it happen again? The secret that changed everything. For viewers across America, hometown continued as though nothing had ever happened. Each week, Ben and Aaron Napier welcomed families, sketched out floor plans, and unveiled stunning transformations. To fans, it looked effortless, as if the couple had never faced a moment of doubt. But behind the polished episodes and warm smiles lay a secret that almost no one knew. The night of near collapse was carefully tucked away, hidden from the public eye. Why? Because to reveal it would have shaken the trust of millions who believed in the Napier as symbols of strength and hope. Could fans handle knowing how close their favorite builder had come to walking away? Or would it have shattered the image that made hometown such a success? Ben himself carried the weight of that night in silence. Every time he stood before a new project, every time he smiled for the camera, he remembered how close he had come to laying it all down. Did that memory make him stronger, or did it haunt him? Could a man truly move forward when the thought of quitting had once been so real, so near, so final? Erin, too, held the secret close. She knew what it had cost to keep Ben from leaving. Her words, her faith, her refusal to let go had pulled him back from the edge. Yet she also knew how fragile it all was. Could she be sure that the next storm would not push him beyond the point of no return? Was her role as partner now also that of protector, guarding not only their marriage but also the future of the show? The truth is that hometown was never the same after that night. Boundaries were set, schedules shifted, conversations with producers grew more direct. Ben and Aaron no longer agreed to everything. They learned to say no, even when saying no risked upsetting the network. For fans, the episodes kept rolling out, filled with laughter and charm. But beneath each smile and each reveal was a hard-earned truth. Hometown had nearly lost its heart, and though the secret stayed hidden from the public, those who were closest never forgot how fragile success can be. The night Ben nearly quit was never broadcast. No episode captured the slammed doors, the sleepless hours, or the breaking words, but it was real, and it was the turning point that ensured the show could go on. In the end, the secret that changed everything was not that Ben almost left. It was that Aaron stood firm, love held steady, and together they proved that even at the edge of collapse, some foundations can still be saved. And so, the truth comes into focus. The night Ben Napier nearly quit hometown was not just another rough evening in Laurel. It was the moment that tested the very foundation of everything he and Aaron had built together. Behind the smiles, behind the camera crews, behind the perfectly finished homes, was a man at his breaking point and a woman determined not to let him walk away. It was a reminder that even the strongest people we admire carry battles we never see. The story you have just heard proves that fame does not shield anyone from struggle, and that even in the brightest spotlights, shadows can fall. But it also proves something else. Love, partnership, and resilience can carry us through the darkest of nights. Without Aaron's stand and Ben's choice to press forward, hometown as we know it might not exist today. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Ben made the right choice by staying? And how would you have handled the same pressure? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and never miss a moment of untold truth.